Hello, everyone. My name is Muriel, and I'm on the board here at Dummerston Historical Society. I just cannot tell you how happy I am to see all of you. We've had an amazing summer. We had first a wonderful exhibit, The Faces of Dummerston, with Chuck Fish's photos all over here. We had many visitors, followed by our artisans exhibit, again with art, local art, all around here and in the middle and hanging from the ceiling. And we had many people. I think I saw in the book over here that there were 200 people that visited on Apple Pie Day. So we've had hundreds of people in and out of our little schoolhouse. It's very touching, very touching. And now, this evening, having this wonderful opportunity to remember Dr. Grace Burnett, who was such a keystone of Dummerston, from West Dummerston, lived in West Dummerston, born in West Dummerston?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Born in West Dummerston as well.
Yep.
And there may be some of you who knew her. At any rate, Dr. Tortolani, thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure.
And for he'll help us to remember her life, her incredible life. The only business announcements I wanted to make to you was to thank again the select board and the getting of the ARPA funds, which have allowed us to have heat pumps to keep us warm and cool, have painted our building, have washed our building. You know what happened with painting this summer, right? It didn't happen. But he did wash it. It looks much better. In the spring we'll paint when the weather turns better. We're all insulated underneath and above, and we're very grateful for that. Not to say, however, that we don't have electric bills and heating bills and all those kinds of things. So there is a donation jar if anyone feels so moved. We always welcome your, not required, of course, but if you would like to do that, there is a jar there. We'd appreciate it. And I'd like to remind you too that the town office is open. There's no bathroom facility in this building, but the town office is open. Open the door and the bathroom's on your left. So I think without further ado, I will introduce Chuck Fish, who will then introduce Bob Tortolani. Is that what will happen?
Pretty much on first. Well, I certainly echo Muriel's sentiments, seeing so many people here. And when the film is shown, which I'll mention in a minute, some of the people seated over there may want to stand up and scrunch back a little bit to have a better view of the screen. But in any case, greetings, and let me tell you briefly the order of the evening. First, some thanks, which I'll come to in a moment, and then a very brief explanation of how this little historical society became a center for Dr. Burnett studies and general interest in her life and practice. And then something on Dr. Burnett's character and personality, because she was a remarkable person, independent of her remarkable medical career. And then we will see a film by Carolyn Peck on her life, which will show you physical evidence of the various stages of her life from childhood through her into her medical career. And then, of course, the main event of the evening, which will be a discussion of her medical practice by Dr. Robert Tortolani. And I will introduce him appropriately when the time comes. So first, thanks, of course, to Dr. Tortolani, and then to Alan and Sally Seymour, who transferred the contents of the videotape of the film to a digital drive, flash drive, so that we are able to project it to you. And then thanks to Roland Volbear from the Chesterfield Historical Society, who brought over the projector and worked on setting it up. But to the rescue came Kevin Ryan. And if you ever have any problem electronic, it's Kevin, and he's here. And then warm thanks to Fran Lingard Hansen, Randy Holhut, and the Commons for a most remarkable article. That was actually an original piece of research as well as a publicity item. And then to Ruth Barton, who provided us just recently with a remarkable genealogy of Dr. Burnett's family, and that's on the shelf in the back with a note explaining the contents. And surprisingly, but most wonderfully, Russ from BCTV, who's standing almost to the ceiling.
Hey, Ross!
He's filming this for us free of charge, and it will go on our website eventually. So for all these people, then how did Dummerston Historical Society become a Dr. Burnett Center? It began with Shorty Ferret of fond memory, and Dr. Burnett's family photo albums, of which there were several, and a most remarkable collection of herself, of her relatives, of her horses, even trick photos that she and her brother took where they showed them dueling with themselves. A quite remarkable collection. We don't have the albums, but Shorty let us copy a number of the filmed photos in that collection, and there's a display of some of them on the back wall that you may already have noticed. And then Jean Brown, who came to occupy a house that Dr. Burnett herself lived in retirement, or late practice in retirement, called me one day and said, "I think we have Dr. Burnett's medical library. Would you like it?" And I jumped out of my chair and I dashed to West Dummerston, and you'll see that library right next to Russ over there.
Wow.
Bookshelf that John Pinckney brought in. 44, 46 volumes of the books that accompanied her throughout her medical career, and about which Dr. Tortolani will have some things to say. And then finally to Joanne Tier, who is a daughter-in-law of Elsie Tier, who gave us a number of Dr. Burnett papers. And I mentioned Elsie Tier because she wrote, she was Dr. Burnett's office girl, her words, for many years. And she loved Dr. Burnett, and she left what she called an affectionate memoir. It's a most remarkable document. It's moving, it's informative, it's detailed, and I encourage anybody who has any interest at all in this subject, in Dr. Burnett, to leave your email address if you have email, and I will send it that document as an attachment to your email. If you don't have email, let us know and we'll get it to you some other way. If you had really good vision, you could read it on the wall right behind Kevin, because it's spread out there on the wall just to show you what it's like. So my remarks about her character and personality, which come next, are drawn almost exclusively from that document. We're so glad to have it in our collection. So, page 2. Her character and personality, mainly now not medical information. 1, she was a woman of great ambition and gumption. She knew from early on she wanted to be a doctor, she planned for it, she worked for it. She was ambitious in the best sense of the word. At a time when very few women went into medicine, she had the imagination and the courage to take on this difficult, demanding professional life. And she, by hard work, energy, and desire, she made it work. As a girl, she knew she wanted to be a doctor from early on. She used to treat the animals on her family farm in West Dummerston. She was also adventurous. She loved horses, and she quite inventive. She made her own saddle, her own bridle, and other riding gear. And Elsie Tier recalled seeing her galloping across the meadows on her father's horse when she's, what, 12 years old or so. She was very much a lover of the community, of Brattleboro and the surrounding area, once she was established in practice. And Elsie Tier tells us about the various organizations she belonged to. There were at least a dozen I counted in that document. She was known as Miss SPCA, Society of Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, because she was so active in it. She founded the Brattleboro Riding Club and competed in competition as an equestrienne and won at least 2 first prizes and perhaps many more. She owned a stagecoach of all things. And as a director of the Valley Fair, she could decide what was to go on, so on one occasion she staged a hold-up of her coach. Many men with pistols and masks, bandits, the whole works, for the entertainment of the community. And that's just a bit of it all. She never stopped working and thinking about the town she lived in and the neighboring towns. And Dr. Tortolani will tell us how that enthusiasm and energy carried over into her medical practice. Now, for the main event, I'm proud to introduce Dr. Tortolani, who is waiting in the wings. He practiced medicine in Brattleboro for 44 years, I believe. He retired a few years ago, but I don't think it made any difference in his daily because from what I understand, he's as busy now as ever. He meets weekly with a veterans group. He runs a free clinic. He teaches medical students. He reads history. So he's a very active man. And I must say that often when we invite a speaker, well, I say when I invited him, I'm inviting a doctor, we're inviting a doctor to talk about a doctor. Nothing could be simpler. On a lazy Sunday afternoon, he can put his notes together and he'll do a fine job. It wasn't like that. He came to the schoolhouse repeatedly, over and over. He took home some of her books. He studied the books. He knew which volumes were important to her as a medical student, which volumes were important to her as a practitioner. He spent hours, days preparing for this event. So I am immensely grateful to him and astonished, to tell you the truth. I've never seen a speaker who so gave himself to this little historical society. So I'm proud to introduce him. Let's welcome him. But in my enthusiasm, I kind of jumped out of the sequence. Because we are going to see the film first. That's what I thought.
All right.
But he can wait. Some of you in the back, I don't know if you can see the screen. You might want to leave your chair temporarily and edge around a little bit. But I leave that up to you. So Kevin is now the master of the occasion.
move someplace over here where you're gonna be able to see?
Close the door.
And then
Door enough? Door enough? We can get that light.
close the door.
Oh, never mind.
The light.
Never mind. Oh, okay. I think I can open it.
Maybe not.
Where do I have to stand?
Now I ask you to remember those introductory remarks.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Chuck, for that introduction. And thanks to the Dummerston Historical Society for asking me to be here today. I suggest that we all take a good deep breath and enjoy the moment. We are in this gorgeous, gorgeous setting, and we are celebrating an amazing human being, amazing woman. I know she's a native of Dummerston, but a little bit of our BMH family wants to have a little bit of that. We want to share her. She's big enough to go around. And as Chuck said, we spent a lot of time here, some very nice hours talking about her, going over the literature you have here, looking at her books. And I can tell you, the more I read about her, the more I liked her. I'm sorry that she I was never able to be a colleague. She died basically the same time I was graduated from college, so that kind of gives you a sense here. And I got here to Brattleboro along with a lot of other friends I see in the audience here in 1974, or late 73, about 10 years after her death. So I thought the film was really great. It tells the story of her life up until her becoming a physician, and I think it tells it very, very well. And that poem that she had there that was said at the end was her favorite poem. It was said at her funeral. It was the poem she liked, and it basically speaks to the fact that she loves Dummerston. This is where she really wanted to be, and always, and this was the end of her journey, and she really appreciated that. I also wanted to thank Fran Hansen for that incredibly good article. I
Sorry about that. If you haven't seen this, please get it. It's out there for a few more days until next Wednesday. It's really well done. And I can't tell you how many people have stopped and either emailed me, the modern way, called me, less modern but modern, talked to me the old-fashioned way about how she influenced their lives. So that means I have an older crowd that I was speaking to, but some of them said, well, my father always spoke about her. The bottom line is, this lady died 60 years ago, 6-0, and people are talking about her as if it was yesterday, were yesterday. Pretty impressive. I just would say that's amazing to me. At any rate, I learned a lot about her. I'm going to share some things, primarily not so much about her life up until her coming here to set up her office, but from then on. But I'm going to start with I saw Dr. Popture here. He and I spent a lot of time in COVID clinics in the last year and a half, 2 years. And I was always looking for questions from people. And Dr. Burnett, by the way, will be happy about this little bit of humor. The patient, I was looking for questions. I love questions. And the patient said, "Doctor, do you know why ants don't get COVID?" I was trying to think, well, this is a human disease. You know, I don't, well, whatever. That she did. She said, because they have antibodies. All right, so anyway, I learned something. And what I'm hoping, that's a metaphor for what I'm hoping that you all leave here having learned something about medicine, or about the tools of medicine, or about what this wonderful young woman physician was going through as she set up her office. She set up her office on Elliott Street in 1914, as you heard. I do want to just back up for 1 minute and say, I believe that her ability to go to medical school was not only her incredible stamina and energy, but it was her family, okay? Her roots. I don't think she would have been able to do it without her mother, father, brother supporting her, okay? If they said, nah, you know, women don't do this. I'm taking a course in art right now, women in art. The only way a woman in art up until the last 50 to 100 years could go anywhere would be if their family supported them in every way, not only financially but spiritually. So she had that support. I believe she was so grounded in her community, the farm setting, the family, that she had the stamina, the energy, and the support. Her brother going there to, I mean, imagine her brother going to Michigan, University of Michigan, and spending some time there while she got settled. I think he was there most of the year. That's pretty amazing. Okay. Let's go to her setting up this office. I see my friend Dean Bresnahan here. I honestly was not courageous enough to set up an office myself in 1974, okay? 1974, she did this in 1914. It was nice to have a colleague, a friend, working on the finances, on the knowledge of doing it. And let me tell you, it was nice to have that camaraderie. She did this herself. Okay, she had her family. But let's just think about what that Mayo medical staff was thinking about her. Okay, I would love to have been a fly on the wall in the medical staff room or the medical library when these fellows were sitting around talking about this new woman. And she's from here, and she's coming. And have you ever practiced with a woman? And they probably said, I've never seen a woman in medicine. And are they threatened by it? Are they thinking, well, are they going to take patients away from me? Maybe the women are going to want to see another woman, particularly for obstetrics and things like that. So I don't know how she was received, but you saw Dr. Hogel and Dr. Wheeler. That's how far back I go. They were both friends. You saw them at the end there in the celebration of her life. before she passed on, and they clearly loved her. And I got the sense that everybody loved her. You know, that's the way it goes. I mean, she just was an amazing person. So anyway, she has the fortitude, the strength, the energy to set up a practice. How do people get in touch with her when they need medical care? Most of the medical care was not done in the office. The office was there. Elsie was not there answering the phone, okay, or doing emails. She was there maybe picking up something. One of the doctors in one of the memoirs said that the typical doctor's office in 1900 consisted of 2 rooms. One room was for the patient waiting for the doctor. The other was for the doctor waiting for the patient. And, I can tell you, on a personal note, my dad was a GP in rural Connecticut. I lived upstairs with my family. Office was downstairs with 3 rooms. He spent 9 years after high school preparing to see his first patient. And it was during the middle of the Depression. He did not see a patient for 17 days after setting up his office. Those were the days where people, yes, they made house calls, a lot of them, always in the morning, not with a horse. Someone actually asked me in Fran's article, "Did your dad ride a horse?" I said, "No, my dad did not ride a horse. My dad was an urban kind. I mean, he grew up in a city, but he went to rural Connecticut. At any rate, I just want to say the Depression was so bad. It was an amazing time. But at any rate, what I'm getting at is that it was not easy to set up, to even have the gumption, the courage. This is a courageous woman to do what she did. What were the tools that a young doctor had at age, let's say she was 28 when she started, to take care of people? Well, she had some training. She had probably 5 to 6 years of training, so she knew what she was doing for sure. But I would say the skills that she had to start with are the same skills that any physician or any healthcare practitioner has. His 5 senses, you know, your vision, your hearing, sense of feel, your taste, your smell. Very important. If you don't have all those, you're not going to have the same, abilities. I also think the heart, compassion, the ability to listen is very, very important. This is something that she would teach her medical students. I don't know if she had medical students. I love teaching medical students, and this is something we teach all the time, the very, very basics of listening and respecting the person whom you're trying to work with to help that patient. So we also teach, I hope it never becomes old-fashioned, we teach the 4 things: observation, percussion, palpation, and auscultation. You know, so this is where we're going to get now to the tools. She had the tools of knowledge, compassion, and her 5 senses. This is where I want to make sure you don't have to take notes. There's not going to be any test after this. I was fascinated by some of the things I learned as I took my bag. This is a bag that Evelyn True, the wife of Ansel True from Northfield, Massachusetts, gave me that bag in 1974. As I got here, I got to know her. Lovely lady. She eventually was my patient for a long time. But that is Dr. True's bag. It's very similar to my dad's bag, and I did use this on home visits during the time of my career. And I want to go through some of the things. You've all seen this stethoscope. So it's been said, and we try to teach the medical students, that the most important part of the stethoscope is the part that sits between the 2 ears. It's knowing what you're listening to, knowing what you're trying to figure out what you're going to hear, whether you're listening to the chest, listening to the heart, or listening to the abdomen. The bowel sounds, it's true. You've got to know what you're listening for, just kind of listening. The medical students always, they make you think they know what they're doing, but it takes a long time to get the skills of using them. But this is something come right in, please. Welcome. I just wanted to say, I want to go through some of the things. I wanted to be sure all these things existed when Dr. Burnett started in 1914. The stethoscope was actually invented in 1816, so we had 100 years there, okay? This was 1816. The blood pressure cuff, I imagine she had something fairly similar to this. Blood pressure is always a problem as we go into the medical problems. The blood pressure cuff was invented in 1881, and that's, you know, pretty good. 1881. Next is this is called an otoscope. You look at ears and sometimes throats with this. And the otoscope was invented in 1830. So, good, she had all these so far. The next one, the ophthalmoscope, eyes, 1851. So, she had all these in her bag. If she could afford them, she probably did. She needed them. These are the tools of the trade. A tuning fork is used not only in the musical world, but it's also used to test hearing. The tuning fork was actually invented in 1555. 1555. Now that to me was pretty amazing, but it's a tool in the tool bag. I don't have a reflex hammer here to test the dependent reflexes. That was 1875. Adhesive tape, I don't have here, 1845. Tongue depressor, yes, 1860. All right. A mercury thermometer, we can't use them anymore, it's the gold standard. 1750, the mercury thermometer, gone now. We had to take them off our walls in our offices, throw them away, or send them to a country that didn't have any so we could get rid of the dangers of mercury. That was a rule back, that was a painful rule, an expensive rule, unfortunately. Syringes, they are initially glass and with needles. She had those, but I have to be careful. She couldn't have had this in there because this became about in 1950 is the 55, the plastic syringe, 1955. So yes, it would have been in the last 10 years of her career. Band-Aids, interestingly, Johnson & Johnson, 1920. Okay, so 1920 Band-Aids were invented. So she had them early on in her career. Cotton-tipped applicators, 1923. You know, you can still invent something, you just have to find out what the need is, but these things were invented along the way. It's amazing. Scalpel. This goes back just about 100 years. I think it was 1916 was the first scalpel just like this that had a sharp blade on it. That was just about the time she started, a year or two after she started. I guess it was 1915. Now she was very interested in obstetrics and gynecology. I don't know what equipment she had for that. Oh, by the way, the other one was, you know, light, a flashlight. Flashlights were early. They were about 100 years ago. She had probably a lot of obstetrical equipment, but I don't know what she had. I'm only speculating that she had all these things. Most importantly was her knowledge and her compassion. And I did want to say, you know, I forgot to mention, this is a picture, I'm sorry you can't see it, but it's a picture of a telephone that was pictured in the 1922 issue of the Journal of the American Medical Association. And it's encouraging doctors to consider purchasing one of these. You know, it's not only for the doctors that people might want to get in touch with us, but also for the patient who had to be admitted to the hospital and who wanted to do some work from his hospital bed. Let's say you had a baby and you were forced as a mother to be in there for 2 weeks, believe it or not. Nowadays it's 1 day. You know, but they were espousing the use of a telephone. The telephone was really not in general use in rural Vermont until the 30s or 40s. Wow. I saw someone on my route again, someone to talk to me about the fact that one of the babies was born in the house. Dr. Burnett didn't get there on time. But the reason she didn't get there on time is the father of the baby to come went down to the corner store and left a message at the corner store that if she came in, please tell her that I mean, these were not the easiest ways to get in touch with somebody. I guess the rule was either the oldest son or a hired boy or the oldest male in the household would take his horse and go to the office and leave a message there, or go to the house of the doctor and leave a message. You know, think about it. You know, it's not easy to get in touch with someone without a phone. You know, so, you know, phones were not in general use here until well into her career. So, anyway, those are some of the caveats of her people getting in touch with her. The diseases she was faced with, quite honestly, I can only imagine. I'm fortunate that I did not practice medicine during the first year of COVID, because I think the nurses and the doctors who had to deal with the deaths of so many of their patients, because it was a new disease and we didn't have any tools, they went through this incredibly difficult situation of seeing people die, who didn't have to die if we knew how to treat these illnesses. Well, unfortunately, Dr. Grace Burnett was in a situation where a huge number of diseases were there, presenting themselves to her, and no real answer for it. A lot of the infectious diseases, you treat the symptoms, and that's it. One of the doctors in his memoirs said, and believe it or not, that this is for Dr. Haydock, a pediatrician, 9 out of 10 members, children in a family in Kansas died in 1 week of diphtheria. 9 out of 10. The 10th was a baby who was still nursing, and the mother refused to have that baby anywhere near the other kids. 9 out of 10. The diphtheria antitoxin immunization was developed in 1923. But I would guess that Dr. Burnett sat at the bedside of people who were struggling to breathe with that diphtheria membrane in the back of their throat encroaching on the airway. I personally can't understand that. I can't, it's beyond me. She had to have a great deal of compassion and I would say fortitude. How does one continuously see people die of an infectious disease because we don't have an answer for it? There just wasn't an answer for that particular disease. Tracheotomies, some people tried it, most people didn't. It didn't work. It just was too bad a disease. So many people died of that disease. Other diseases that we had are the simple strep throat. Scarlet fever is basically caused by strep, and strep is a very common disease in this day. I always remember that if you don't treat strep, if someone has strep, you don't treat it, there's 1 chance out of 100 that the untreated patient with strep will get either glomerulonephritis, which is a very bad kidney problem, or a damaged heart valve. So she had all these people who had swollen glands, fever, big, awful-looking throat, probably had strep. I don't think there were any necessarily a diagnosis that she made for sure, but what can you do? You can use cold water, you can use symptoms. It's hard to do anything. It's really tough. And she knew that these people, some of them were going to get very ill in the future as a result of the infection. Viruses were always around. There was probably some typhoid fever, I wouldn't be surprised. Infectious diseases that most of us didn't have to deal with as children. Well, I guess our audience fared 50-50. Maybe mumps, measles, German measles, chicken pox, all those immunizations came along. I think it was early 50s for polio, another one. These incredibly difficult, damaging, infectious diseases that she had to deal with all the time. I almost cannot imagine how a feeling, caring physician could could just deal with all the loss. I mean, she had to be sitting at the bedside of a lot of people who just were not going to make it. And of course, we had things like atherosclerosis, heart disease, strokes, all that stuff. We had cancer. What do you do with cancer? Well, you don't know if it's spread or not. Most of the doctors, I think, probably, try to remove, if there were a big mass somewhere, try to remove it and help the patient. Infections involving the intestinal, the peritoneal cavity, like a ruptured appendix, people would do an emergency surgery. In the 1880s, 1870s in Kansas, they would do it right on the kitchen table. It's something as big an operation as an intestinal operation. Here in Vermont in 1915, I imagine the bulk of those went to BMH. Starting in 1904, I know that the first appendectomy was done at BMH in 1904. I'm presuming that there were probably some physicians who were particularly skilled in certain operations, and I imagine they kind of helped each other. Once they got over the fear of having a woman doctor amongst them, I expect that they greeted her with great, love and caring, and they shared probably information, and they figured out who was the best person in the community to take care of a big operation or a very seriously ill person who might have certain skills. That's always happened. Of course, you don't remember, we don't really have specialization until the 40s or 50s in the United States. Most people were GPs, general practitioners, and they had evolved to family physicians. And at any rate, so I think the bottom line is it had to be an extremely difficult time for both the patient and the physician in the early 1900s up until 1950 or 60, when, thank God, water supplies were better, nutrition better, immunizations are out there. It's amazing how much has been prevented. We don't know every day how much we're preventing with those immunizations, but it is remarkable what we are preventing. So my hat's off to her for her fortitude to honestly put up with what she had to put up with. I have to say, on a personal level, I felt very bad about her marriage. For someone who is as fantastic a person as she was, there was a problem in that marriage. She had the courage to end that marriage when it wasn't a good marriage. I can't say enough about the courage that this person had. That film beautifully went over the community services that she did. That library is what brought us together today, so I thank the library for doing that. I want to just say that they're heavy. Medical books are heavy. Chuck and I probably got our biceps strengthened a little bit by handling those over the course of 2 or 3 or 4 visits here, which I enjoyed very much. We found out that of the 50 or so books, about 40% of them, 20 or so, belonged to a fellow by the name of Dr. George Gale, G-A-L-E. And Dr. Gale was a medical officer on the Union side during the Civil War. Wow. And he was a particularly good surgeon. He was very well known for his surgical skills. He practiced in Brattleboro for about 35 or 40 years, eventually retired, died in 1907. And my guess is that library might have been, as happened for the whole library, it might have been purchased by somebody and given as a gift to Dr. Burnett. I'm not sure what happened, but and as I went through the other books, about a third of them were books that she purchased for her medical studies and her pre-med and med studies, and a third were ones that she bought to kind of refer to when she was in practice. And by the way, I knew what was what, because she would say Dr. Grace Burnett once she got her MD degree, and before that it was Grace Burnett, West Dummerston, Vermont. So, in looking at it, but there were not lots and lots of underlined and lots of notations. The one that The ones that she bought for consultation purposes, there was one in pediatrics, one operative gynecology, one operative surgery, and of course, Osler's Principles and Practice of Medicine. That was a volume that all doctors in study and all doctors in practice referred to. There are other medical textbooks that have come out since then in internal medicine and family medicine, but it's during those days, William Osler, who's kind of the father of American medicine and British medicine. He's not Hippocrates, he's the father of medicine for everybody, but William Osler was a wonderful guy, and he wrote great things, and he was a great physician. So anyway, yeah, I felt very bad about her experience in her life, but you know, she really, you know, when you put it all together, she had the package. She has her roots in a small Vermont town. She has the courage, with her family's support, to go on to medical school. She opens up a practice with an entirely male-dominated medical staff. She's come to be loved not only by all her patients, but her doctor, friends, colleagues. She was clearly an incredible obstetrician. From everything I've heard, she was very compassionate. She was able to sit down and listen. And you know, that's the kind of thing that would really help mental illness. There was always mental illness. There was always depression, always anxiety. We had the retreat here, but most of the people that get treated for mental health issues are treated in the primary care office setting, which I'm sure she did very, very well indeed. So let's see, I'm just trying to think. Oh, the one other thing I wanted to say is injuries were very prominent, I'm sure, in Brattleboro area. You know, we had the Organ Works, 1,000 employees, a lot of people doing stuff with their hands. We had the printing organizations, printing factories in town, a lot of other small factories. My guess is that there were huge numbers of people who had hand injuries. They were probably treated in the home or at the business or maybe at BMH. I don't know. While I'm thinking about it, I want to thank BMH for finding this beautiful film we all saw. I meant to say that. BMH, when the medical library went down the tubes for the new construction, the film got misplaced. We couldn't find it. Some miraculous person found it, and that's why we saw that today. And if it weren't for the Chesterfield Library friends, they actually gave us the loan of that projector. So listen, there's a lot of people who were involved in this whole operation. So, and that's a wonderful film, by the way. So to kind of, we've already seen, heard her, that beautiful poem that she loved so much to have it said at her funeral, and we've already heard it said today. I think that we can all be proud of knowing about this woman. I mean, she was iconic. She is absolutely a leader in medicine in Vermont, the first Windham County woman physician. She's the 5th woman physician in this state. I don't know if the other women physicians came from Vermont. It may be she was the first native Vermonter to be a woman physician. I don't know. I don't know the story, but I know that the first woman physician was Elizabeth Blackwell in 1849, and she graduated from Genesee Medical College in Genesee, New York. But I do know that Our Lady, Grace Burnett, is an absolutely amazing person. And I'm actually thrilled today that all of you are here to get to know her a little bit and maybe get to love the kind of person that she was. And you know, she has given so much to her community in every kind of way. I mean, not only being a good doctor, but being a kind, nice person who loved animals and did so much for the community. I mean, what more can you say? I mean, this is an amazing human being. Probably this celebration is long overdue, and again, I thank the medical library being donated to the Historical Society of Dummerston that prompted this, and I've got the letter that Chuck sent me in March of this year saying, would you like to be involved in a little celebration Grace Burnett, maybe look at her books. And I said, well, sure, I'd love to learn more about her. And it's been a great, great pleasure, and it's been a pleasure to be here today. And I imagine there'll be time for questions and answers, and thank you for listening. The question comes up, how many people here were birthed by her? Were there anybody here? Wow. Okay. Chuck, do you want to go ahead and take over the question and
Well,
answer?
no, Will, they've been directed right to you.
All right. Well,
But the one thing I would add, there are people here, I'm told, who knew her. So with those
Yes.
people, let's give them a chance first to
Sure.
say something if they wish.
Wonderful.
I was told who,
Oh, I got one right here in front.
okay,
I
Okay.
used to work with her when I was like 12 years old, so 16 probably.
your
I was
name?
a neighbor down here.
Oh, Don,
Yeah, I saw her at her house over in, she treated me over at her house just before she passed away. She took me in, you know, because she always had me. So, but I used to work for her down the street, you know. I mean, I worked in the neighborhood, and so I'd go with her. She'd get a flat tire, she had me a ride to change the tire. And, you know, and my wife always gives me the devil because everybody does. When I go down the road, I look everywhere. Well, that's Dr. Burnett's idea about you gotta go down, you have to look at the scenery, you know, and it's a wonderful world. So I'm still going down the road looking everywhere.
All right.
My wife kills me, I mean, she gets mad because I'm not looking at the road anymore. I don't know, I'm not sure on the way home.
Yeah.
She had me plant a tree over in West Dummerston by the water. Right there used to be like a little water fountain or something, right across from that old store. Right on that bank. And I almost think that was a picture she was taking, a picture with in that magazine, paper.
Yeah.
She was sitting in the grass, and that looks just like where I plant the tree. You know?
Well,
I don't know if it ever grew or not.
Bumpy tree.
Yeah.
I did a lot in the horses, like
Good.
Mr. Grover, I worked with him. I worked with them, and I got rid of her. You want to know, I got rid of her, the animals we weren't supposed to keep. One time I wanted to keep her German Shepherd, but he beat up her collar, so I got heck that day, because I didn't put that German Shepherd in we put them in a box and put exhaust to them, then I'd take them to her. That's how she had to get rid of the extras. They didn't take them all, you know.
I know.
She had them for a long time, though, especially the horses. She'd never get rid of the horses, a Morgan and that Midnight. You know.
So, Don, your son was one of the 10 or so people who tracked me down, and last week I saw him on a route. We were at the same place together, and he said, "My father can't stop talking about this."
Thank you.
Somebody else who knew her.
Yes, yeah, right here, Bob.
Well, I got to know her through my dad. He worked for her at the barn, take care of the animals and stuff. And I met her probably I was 6 years old or so. And then when I got about 7 or 8, I started working for her. I used to take care of the horses. By the way, her horses were Lady Billy Burt, Queen, King, and the black stallion was named Kentucky Knight. And they were wonderful animals. I used to clean the stalls, I fed them, I put the hay away, I just worked around there.
Was that your father in the movie?
That was my dad. Yeah.
And he was in it too.
And that was you.
Yeah, and then, yeah.
You were in.
But she was a fascinating lady. And you talk about the black bag. She had a black bag.
Yeah,
quite
similar to
like
this.
that. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The lady always drove a DeSoto.
Yeah.
And when everybody came to the house, she'd take that bag and get in that DeSoto and off she'd go.
Joan Bairdale said that she used to show horses, and there was a horse called Wicked Princess. That was really kind of a wild horse. Did you remember that one? Wicked Princess. I got a
I
big
do
kick out
not
of that.
remember that one.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, certainly get the impression she was a horse person and loved horses. Yeah. Anybody else want to speak about? Yes, sir.
Yeah, when we moved to town, we lived right across the road from her. And I used to go over and sit on her porch and she'd visit for hours if you'd stay there.
And your name is?
Harold Newell.
Harold Newell. Okay, you knew her as a,
Yeah, and
yes.
then later, she would go down in the morning, every morning, she'd go down to the post office at West Dummerston and sit in a chair, and whoever come in was dedicated to talk to her.
Oh, that's great.
She was a great lady. She had, at that time, she had donkeys, and they used to get to braying like crazy.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Oh,
The neighbors used to holler.
I used to take care of those donkeys. I remember.
Oh, that's great. It's a wonderful story. Yes, ma'am?
Yeah, Karen Davis. So we lived on Northern Avenue. I was there from 1950 to 1958. And I loved the donkeys. They go, "Ee-haw, ee-haw." And as a kid, you know, it doesn't get much better than that. It's to grow up in it was a dead-end street, which was good with a swamp. And Dr. Burnett had a pasture out behind her house where she had her goats, her horses, her donkeys. And she would have, or at least one time, she had a pet show, a competition for prizes. And she had a go kart, so we could have rides in the go kart if we wanted around the pasture area.
How
My
nice.
brother showed our beagle hound, he got a blue ribbon for that. And I brought some little kittens in a box, and I got honorable mention.
Remember that little playhouse she had out in that field behind the barn? It was a miniature house the kids used to play in it.
Okay.
So you certainly get the impression she loved children.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, in a sense, it's sad that she never had children of her own, but she loved kids and did everything she could to make them happy. Yeah, I mean,
Young people and.
there's no question, she didn't write a memoir because she worked right until she became too ill to work. You know, so she did not have, she could have written a great memoir as an early woman physician. I mean, yes, I'm sorry, Fran.
In the newspapers, when I was doing the research, she was part of so many groups.
Yeah.
And they would say, you could see the ad coming. Dr. Grace Burnett will speak on fill in the blank. And the next day it would say, Dr. Grace Burnett was unavailable, so so-and-so read her paper. I didn't find a single one that she actually was able to attend, but she always wrote them and gave them to somebody else. That's a busy lady.
Very nice.
I also want to say that there was a photograph here of Emma Paddleford, who worked in her stable.
Yeah.
And it was the first woman I ever saw who wore overalls, had her hair cut short, and,
She worked in a greenhouse. She worked at Hopkins Greenhouse.
oh, okay,
She
which was
worked in
right
green-
across
she lived
Western
upstairs
Avenue.
yeah,
Okay, right across Western Avenue.
Yeah, she
So
worked
that
at the
was my
greenhouse
first
with my
introduction
dad.
to a woman who had an alternate choice of lifestyle.
Anybody? Yes,
One more
please.
thing,
Yeah.
the Elsie Tier,
Yeah.
the lady that worked for her,
Yes.
was Jean Brown's mother. Jean Brown is the lady that gave the books
Ah, okay,
here,
okay,
and
nice.
also
Brings us together.
yes, and of course, they ended up living in Dr. Burnett's house. Jean Brown's husband bought that house,
Right, where's that?
Elsie and Tom did.
Yeah.
And it became, and then when they passed, Jean lived there, and then she had these books, because I saw them
Sure.
in her house, and then she's got along, and she says, we gotta get rid of this.
Absolutely. Well, it's nice that we got here, because
Yes.
it's an important story, really. Here's the story. Anybody else want to share? Yes, please, Beth.
Well, when I was a newly minted graduate nurse, like 3 months, I'm working at the BMH, and this was in 1958, so it was at the end of Dr. Burnett's working time.
Yes.
And I had made rounds with her, which, I mean, I was scared to death of this woman. She was so respected, and her patients just loved her. And as I'm doing the orders, she had written an incorrect order. She had omitted an information I needed to complete the order. And I had to call her. But she was so nice.
Oh, yeah,
She
great.
was just wonderful. She was
Unlike
gracious.
the males you call.
She was just so gracious, about making this omission. It was an omission. That's on the order.
Well, I can imagine it was nice to have a woman, and, to talk. That's one of the problems is that sometimes, at least I think of male physicians, perhaps getting upset with a nurse who bothers her at night, or him at night, and yet it's so important. It's for all about the patient, but sometimes
Oh, yeah.
male doctors get tired sometimes. I'll just say.
Gentleman here.
Yes. Dick.
I'm Dick Hamilton. I was raised in West Brattleboro, up Hamilton Road, and it's a half a mile from Route 9 to our house, and I walked that to school. But when my little brother, 6 years old, had pneumonia, Dr. Burnett, we did have a telephone. Dr. Burnett came, and it was too slippery to come up that half mile, and she walked it. And I was 10 years old, and she came past us. She was huffing and puffing, and it was really hard, just walking. And she came by, and that's what I just remember about her, is that she was very courageous, and
She went out of the way to
her
help people.
endurance.
Thanks for sharing that, Dick.
Yeah, that's.
I did want to say that by that point, would that have been 1940?
1930.
30. Sulfa was just making its way into the medical world, the antibiotic sulfa. Penicillin around 1940. Sulfa was the first antibiotic that I think, was particularly active. So I don't know if she had the drug yet. If you don't have an antibiotic, you just, recommend.
You use a poultice or anyway.
Whatever.
My young brother survived, and I think that. But I also, with the courtesy of Marcia, she dug up a death certificate of my grandmother, and the medical attendant was Grace Burnett.
Yeah, that's great. We made a copy of that for the Historical Society here. That would be nice to be part of the memorabilia.
Yes, indeed.
Wow, thanks, Dick, for that. I don't think, Dick, you had to introduce yourself. I think we all know you. Sure do. Yes.
I remember Dr. Burnett very.
And you tell them your name?
Oh, I'm Janice Martin,
Yeah, thank you, Janice.
and I was born in Brattleboro. Dr. Burnett signed my birth certificate, and she also signed my sister's birth certificate. She was born in Burnett at home. Dr. Burnett was the attending physician, but she didn't get there. So, but we saw her in her office on Elliott Street.
Yeah.
I remember all that.
Nice.
Her voice was very soothing.
Yeah.
She was very, you were her like others.
She would help people simply by listening and by speaking softly. And by the way, thank you for your service as a nurse all these years. We do appreciate your service in the medical field. Yes, please.
Yes, I have a question.
Yes.
When you came to Brattleboro, how many female physicians were there on staff?
I might, let's see. And what year did you get here?
I came in '81 and there were just two of us.
Two of you. Who were the other two?
Well, the other was Sherry Broadhurst.
Sherry got here after I did.
Yeah, she came a year or two before me.
And
And I
before
think
that?
I think that was it.
Okay,
Yeah, I don't
zero.
think they were- I don't think they were-
Zero. When I got here, there were no women. And it's gotten a lot better to have
Oh, yeah.
women, trust me. It's so nice to have women. I do want to say also that in my medical school class, there were 5 women out of 68. And they were the brightest people in the class. I mean, obviously, you have to, it goes without saying, they were the brightest. And now, I'd say 50% or more of the medical students are women, thank God. We're going in the right direction. But yeah, we hadn't come very far through the 70s in terms of women in medicine, and it's really changing. Thanks, Nancy, for that information. Yes,
I'll
John.
mention just
Dr.
in
Lutman.
terms
Yes.
of women in the medical profession, Edith Whittleton was in Bellows Falls starting in the early 1950s, I think.
Okay.
Maybe a little later than that, but she had a practice in Bellows Falls.
Mhm.
I'm trying to think of anybody else in the area.
I think in general, it wasn't that many women physicians through the 50s or 60s, and even up to 70. Yeah, the last 50 years, it's really changed. Yes, please.
Was Dr. Coffey here then? I think she was.
Doctor?
Dr. Coffey. She wasn't an MD, she was an osteopath, and the osteopaths were not allowed to be in the hospital.
I don't know.
I think
What
she
year was she here?
Gosh, I can't remember, I'd have to look it
Oh,
up.
what a shame, I didn't know her. She was an osteopathic? I don't understand that, why she wasn't part of medical.
No, they weren't there.
Because it's
They were allowed to be there.
They weren't allowed to be part of the medical.
Yeah,
Really?
that's changed for sure. Yeah, that changed many, many, many years ago. Yeah.
Because I know my dad was never allowed to be, and he was an osteopath, and he was never allowed to be in the hospital.
Yeah, well, that's a shame because things have really changed.
Dr. Wheeler took care of me when I
Yeah,
had a problem.
very nice. Yes,
So
please.
Bob, which house on West Street was Dr. Burnett's house?
On Western Avenue?
Oh, no, I thought you said she lived in West Dummerston.
She did.
Right
West
beside the
Dummerston.
church, right beside the Baptist church, right in the center.
Okay.
Actually, it's across the road from the fire station and then up. The fire station is north
Okay,
and on the opposite side.
okay.
Was that her house? That was her father's house.
Her
So
father.
it's still there today?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, it was just the same.
Good.
Yeah, just as it was.
Looks
Good,
just like
good.
it was.
Nice.
Near Dennis Tier's house? That's right next to
No,
Dennis.
it's
It's
not
beside
Dennis.
it.
So next, if you're looking right at the church, it's to the right.
Anybody else? Yeah, John?
Oh, I have one further question.
Yes, please.
She attended Women's Medical College in
Yes.
Philadelphia, which was, you may have done research on when it was founded, but it was certainly a thing when she.
It was founded in
there.
1850.
Okay.
And actually, it was the second. There was one in Boston for women only, just before that.
Well,
So
that's-
the Women's Medical College of Philadelphia was the second. That film said the first, but it was the second.
Was there any place else where she would have been welcome to apply and go to medical school?
Well, the one in Boston.
Was it still there when she was going to medical school?
Yeah. The Boston one was for women. That was formed the same year that the.
Yes, but was it still in existence in the early 20th?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Was it still in existence? I don't know. I didn't do that research. I don't know.
Did you
It's
say,
a
Bob,
good
that
question. But I wouldn't think that by 1910 or so, that women would be looked upon as being so unusual to be in a medical school. But maybe 2 or 3 people in the class, I don't know. One?
I have heard but can't quite remember when UVM Medical School first admitted a woman. It was probably about that time, but it was extremely unusual.
Yeah. Well, I really do thank Dr. Burnett, and I thank Elizabeth Blackwell and her sister for being the first 2 women graduates. And, led the way. I mean, obviously, they're all very, very brave, you know, honestly, to get into the kind of men's world. But thank God that Dr. Yes, did somebody say something? Yes, Peter?
I just wanted
So
to
give it.
say, complimentary to what you had said, that the people who practiced medicine before the age of antibiotics were diagnosticians predominantly. They used their senses, as you said, to make diagnoses, and those diagnoses were predominantly for prognosis purposes. What they would, and how they told the family this, I have never, but just taking your example of diphtheria, for example, well, your 10-year-old son has diphtheria. I know that from, all of my medical training, but I can't do anything. And that must have been so hard.
Can't imagine it.
And to have to tell the family, well, the chances are not so good. That, it must have been just terrible.
I was just relating that to the doctors and nurses dealing with COVID in the first year without even being able to figure out whether a ventilator was helpful or not, or with the positioning of the patient. And we just didn't know in the first few months to the first year. And that has taken a tremendous toll on the nursing and medical profession, actually, in the last 3 years. Yes, please. Yep, you're good.
In the 19th century, the patent medicine industry was huge. Was there a conflict between patent medicine industry and practicing physicians?
A conflict. I know it was very big deal in the 1870s, 80s. I don't know how big a deal it was by the time Dr. Burnett came along. I think, a lot of these things, they show for internal use and external use, that scares me. If the same drug is used externally and internally, I'm not sure I'd use it myself, but, it is interesting, and a lot of money was made on those patent medicines. Yeah, but honestly, I don't know the answer to that.
A lot of the patent medicines, I think, a base ingredient was alcohol. And I think there was sort of a delusion blocking your medicine. Also, the Pure Food Drug Act, 1906, I think kind of ended up creating boundaries.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that came along. Yeah, Stu.
Well, I was going to say, the Flexner report really changed how doctors practiced too, because it said that medicine needed to be based on science. And that was, what, early
1922, I think, the Flexner report. A lot of medical schools went out of existence as a result of that report. And the best, I think the premier medical school in the country at that point was Johns Hopkins, I think a lot of modeling was after that medical school. One of the problems with that is some of the medical schools that were primarily for minorities closed. And that was a problem because, perhaps something inferior is better than nothing. And unfortunately, I think it became a problem for some of the minority people to get into other medical schools when their own medical school closed. And I'm not sure about women, whether that affected women, but I do know about minorities, so that's a problem. Yeah. Yes, sir.
The house that she was born in and was raised in is still there, to this day on the hill.
Yeah,
Not
that's
right
great.
on the building, just up the hill.
Okay,
On
okay.
Hague Road.
Well, there's an amazing number of stories. Yes, I'm sorry. That's your house. Great. I'm going to ask the directors here how long you want the Q&A to continue. I think it can go on all day.
I would say as long as there are questions or until our passion for the refreshments overwhelms us.
Charles? Let's go for a while. Yes,
Charles? More.
According to an article in 1969, proud reformer, Dr. Lucille Coffey began her practice in 65.
In which year?
1965.
Dr. Coffey in 65. So she was here, Nancy?
Yeah,
She wasn't part of the medical staff.
no, but
So I
she,
didn't.
Right, but she was an
she
osteopathic.
was with my father.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's tough to think that they weren't part of the medical staff. Yeah. Thank you for that information. Yes, sir.
Her office on Elliott Street, is it still there? What number Elliott?
Is it a flower store now? Or-
Above the ice cream shop. Above the ice cream shop,
Above the ice cream shop. 17?
Next
Is the
to the
number?
bookstore.
I think.
where the School of Ballet used to be.
Okay, thank you.
Blueberry
Yes,
House.
please.
Attention, Joe, I don't know whether Ruth Burton is here, but do you want to mention how she came by that genealogy and what it revealed?
Ruth is here.
Oh, she is here, okay, I couldn't see.
Ruth, do you want to tell the story of how you came by the genealogy?
Well, I came by the genealogy because somebody told me that there were some Dummerston things were going to be auctioned off at the Townsend Auction House. Now, I am not an auction goer. I was most terrified, but I thought, well, I'll go to this auction and see what's going on. And there was a box of photographs, which I still have, but I gotta do a little more digging to get them out. And there was this genealogy. And so I bid on it and I paid $3 or something like that. Obviously, nobody wanted it. And my intention was to bring it to the Historical Society, but somehow or other it just never got here. I never really opened it up and looked at it because I wasn't really interested in the Burnett genealogy. But on the edge, you'll notice there's a place where it tells who prepared it. And it was a Mrs. Akeley who lived on Canal Street in Brattleboro. And my great-grandmother lived with and worked for Mrs. Akeley for a while. She was not well, I guess you'd say. I don't know what was the matter with her, but anyway, a part of my great-grandmother's payment was she did a genealogy of the Houghton family. So I suspect that maybe she was a patient of Dr. Burnett's.
Sure.
And living in town, she didn't grow rutabagas or potatoes or anything to pay her with. So she paid her by doing this genealogy.
And it's an extraordinary record, 18 pages long, tracing many lines of Dr. Burnett's family back. One line back to John Alden and Priscilla Mullins
Whoa.
in 1624. They had come over on the Mayflower. Another line back to an ancestor who fought at the Battle of Bosworth Field in 1485. The last battle in the Wars of the Roses. So we owe all of this to Ruth in some way.
Anybody else want to share? It's so nice to share when it's not a funeral or a... Yes, please.
I only have hearsay, but I've lived in that house on Hague Road that was since 1979, which was what was the old Burnett farmhouse. And one of the stories was that during the Spanish flu, one of Dr. Burnett's patients in town was a young child and her whole family had died. She was an orphan. So you talk about what do you do? So they brought her out to the family farmhouse. And apparently she did die from the flu, and they cremated her, and her ashes are up in some ledge above our house. I've never found that.
Wow.
I mean,
Well, it just goes to show you how terrible things were then, you know. And I was also thinking about the fact that she must have been dealing with a lot of very worried mothers whose sons were going off to France. You know, how scary that was to be in a world war, and that had to have been terrible. I mean, how it would have been so nice to have her sitting down listening to a mother crying, you know, about her son leaving, not knowing he's going to come back. All those are terrible things, honestly.
She's a very caring lady.
Oh, I get it. Yeah, she's terrific. And yes, please.
It's amazing to me how doctors don't get sick themselves. I mean, I know sometimes, but she apparently survived everything that her patients were going through.
Well, yeah, you wonder how she the flu, influenza. Yeah, I don't know. She's another attribute of stamina and strength that she had. Good point. Yeah, I wasn't one of those lucky people. I would always get with my patients. I really did. I got sick a lot. Jeez, I really did. Okay, are we there?
Yeah.
Okay, we're
Remember that Now I have one.